God isn't late. He's working. Those two things get confused constantly because from where you're standing, they can look identical. Nothing visible happening, no timeline in sight, silence stretching longer than you expected it to. Most people measure whether God is working by whether they can see the results yet. If nothing has changed on the outside, the assumption is that nothing is happening at all, that the process has stalled, or worse, that it was never real to begin with. But Ecclesiastes 3:11 says something that reframes this completely. He has made everything beautiful in its time. Not beautiful immediately, beautiful in its time, which means the current moment, the one that doesn't look beautiful or finished at all, might simply be a stage of a process that hasn't reached its time yet. Here's what's actually at risk if you keep measuring God's work by what's visible. You start to believe that stillness means absence, that silence means abandonment. And once you believe that, it becomes very hard to keep showing up fully to your own life, because some part of you has already decided the outcome isn't coming. That belief doesn't just cost you hope, it costs you the version of yourself that would have kept building, kept growing, kept preparing. Because why prepare for something you've quietly concluded isn't happening? Think about the story of Lazarus for a moment, because it's one of the clearest pictures in Scripture of delay that looked like absence but wasn't. John 11:6 records something that's almost uncomfortable to read. When Jesus heard that his close friend Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. Not because he didn't care, not because he was too busy. He stayed, on purpose, while someone he loved was dying. And by the time he arrived, Lazarus had already been dead 4 days. Imagine being Martha or Mary in that gap. Imagine watching your brother decline, sending word to the one person you believed could help, and hearing nothing back. No visit, no message, no sign that your desperate call had even registered. That silence would have felt exactly like what you might be feeling right now, forgotten, deprioritized, met with delay instead of response. And yet the delay wasn't neglect. It was the exact space required for something greater than a healing to take place, a resurrection that could only happen because the waiting had been allowed to stretch as far as it did. This is uncomfortable to sit with, because it means the delay itself can be doing something the immediate answer never could have done. If Jesus had come right away, Lazarus would have been healed, a real, meaningful outcome. But what actually happened, because of the delay, was something the immediate answer couldn't have produced. The waiting wasn't a malfunction in the plan, it was load-bearing. Numbers 23:19 puts language around why this pattern can be trusted, even when it's painful to live through. God is not human, that he should lie, not a human being, that he should change his mind. Does he speak and then not act? Does he promise and not fulfill? That verse isn't comforting in a soft way. It's comforting in a structural way. It's saying the character behind the delay doesn't change based on how long the delay lasts. A promise made doesn't quietly expire just because time keeps passing without visible movement. Let's talk about what working actually looks like during a season that feels completely still. Because the abstract idea is easy to nod along with and much harder to actually trust day to day. Working, in this context, rarely looks like construction you can watch happening. It looks like character being formed in private, patience being stretched past what felt possible, capacity being built for something you can't yet see the shape of. None of that shows up on a timeline the way a finished project does. It shows up later, all at once, in the moment the delay finally ends, and only then does it become obvious that something had been under construction the entire time. Think about what you've actually become during whatever season of waiting you're currently in, even if nothing external has changed yet. Have you grown more patient, even if you'd never have chosen to practice patience this way? Have you learned to sit with discomfort instead of immediately needing to fix or escape it? Have you developed a kind of quiet endurance that didn't exist in you before this season started? None of those changes show up as evidence on the outside, but they are evidence, internal, real, and often more valuable than whatever external outcome you're actually waiting for. Galatians 6:9 addresses this directly, and it's worth hearing in full. Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Notice the conditional buried in that verse, if we do not give up. The harvest isn't guaranteed regardless of what you do during the waiting. It's tied to persistence through the waiting itself. That's not meant to add pressure. It's meant to explain why the season you're in matters, why simply enduring it with integrity is doing something, even when it doesn't feel like progress. This is where it helps to separate two very different kinds of stillness. One kind is genuine stagnation, a season where nothing is being built, where staying is simply avoidance dressed up as patience. The other kind is active waiting, a season where the absence of visible movement is covering real, ongoing construction underneath. From the outside, these two can look exactly the same. The difference is almost never visible from where you're standing in the middle of it. It's usually only visible afterward, once the harvest Galatians describes actually arrives, and it becomes clear which kind of season you were actually in. So how do you tell the difference while you're still inside it? One honest question worth asking is whether you're still showing up fully to your own life, or whether you've quietly started coasting because you've concluded nothing is happening anyway. Active waiting still shows up, still does the work in front of it, still tends to relationships and responsibilities and growth, even without proof that any of it is leading anywhere. Genuine stagnation tends to disguise itself by pointing at the delay as an excuse to stop trying at all. The delay isn't the deciding factor here. Your response to the delay is. A second question worth asking. Are you still capable of imagining a good outcome, even if you can't picture the specific shape of it yet? Stagnation tends to flatten imagination completely. The future stops being pictured at all, good or bad, because picturing anything feels pointless. Active waiting, even when it's exhausted and frustrated, still retains some capacity to imagine that something is coming, even without details. If you find you've stopped picturing any future at all, that flatness is worth naming honestly, because it's a different condition than tired hope, and it may need more than patience to address. It may need support, rest, or simply permission to grieve how long this has taken before you can return to active waiting again. A third question, quieter than the first two. Has your relationship to the delay changed at all, even without the delay itself changing? People in active waiting often describe a shift where the waiting itself stops being the main story of their days. It's still there, still unresolved, but it's no longer the only thing they can think about. If every single day is still consumed entirely by the absence of the outcome, with no room for anything else, that total consumption is worth noticing. It doesn't mean you're doing waiting wrong. It might mean you're carrying more of the weight alone than you need to. Isaiah 46:10 gives language to what's actually happening on God's side of a long delay. I make known the end from the beginning, from ancient times, what is still to come. I say, my purpose will stand, and I will do all that I please. This isn't a promise that every specific outcome you're hoping for will happen exactly the way you're picturing it. It's a claim about the reliability of purpose itself, that whatever is unfolding underneath the silence has an end already known, even if you can't see it yet, and that the end is not contingent on you being able to track its progress along the way. Think about how strange it would be to judge a builder's competence by staring at a construction site during the foundation phase, before any walls exist, before anything above ground is visible at all. From the street, it looks like dirt and machinery and delay. But the foundation phase is often where the most critical work happens, work that determines whether everything built afterward will actually hold. Nobody walks past a foundation site and concludes the building will never exist. They understand that foundations come first, invisibly, before the visible structure rises. Your life during this season might be exactly that, foundation work, unglamorous and invisible, that everything else is going to depend on later. It's worth extending that metaphor one step further. because foundations aren't just slow, they're also frequently covered up entirely once the work is done. Nobody visiting a finished building can see the foundation anymore. It's buried under everything built on top of it, invisible precisely because it did its job correctly. That means some of what's happening in you right now might never be visible even after this season ends. Not because it didn't matter, but because its purpose was to hold up everything that comes next, quietly, without needing credit or visibility of its own. Here's something worth naming honestly. It's possible to believe God is working in the abstract while still living as though He isn't, day to day. Belief and posture aren't automatically the same thing. You can say the right words about trusting the timing while still checking obsessively for signs that something is finally happening, still making anxious decisions designed to force movement, still treating every quiet day as fresh evidence that you were wrong to hope at all. If that's where you are, that's not a failure of faith so much as a very human response to a very long silence. But it's worth noticing the gap between what you believe and how you're actually living inside that belief, because closing that gap is part of what makes the waiting sustainable. There's also something worth saying about the specific shape your waiting might be taking right now, because it rarely looks dramatic from the inside. It looks like an ordinary Tuesday where nothing changed. It looks like checking your phone, your bank account, your inbox, and finding the same nothing you found yesterday. It looks like showing up to work, to relationships, to your own daily routine, without any visible confirmation that any of it is building towards something. That ordinary, undramatic texture is exactly what most real waiting actually feels like. Not a single dramatic moment of doubt, but a long accumulation of unremarkable days that don't feel like progress, because they aren't designed to feel that way while they're happening. It might help to think about a few ordinary, ground-level ways this construction shows up, even when nothing external has changed. It can look like handling a small disappointment with more steadiness than you would have a year ago, without even noticing you did it until afterward. It can look like a conversation you navigated with more patience than you knew you had, or a temptation to give up completely that you resisted almost automatically, without the dramatic internal struggle it would have caused earlier in this season. None of that gets recorded anywhere. There's no notification, no milestone marker. But it's real change, accumulating quietly, and it's often the clearest evidence available that something has, in fact, been happening the entire time. If you're currently in a season like this, it's also worth being honest about what it costs to keep going without confirmation. It's genuinely hard to keep showing up to something you can't measure. Most of what makes waiting sustainable in the long run has less to do with willpower and more to do with finding small, regular ways to remember why you started in the first place. Not through forced positivity, but through honest reflection on what's actually true, even when it doesn't feel true. Writing down what you've noticed changing in yourself, even in small ways, can matter more than it sounds like it should, precisely because the mind forgets gradual change far more easily than it remembers sudden events. If you're in a season like that right now, nothing visibly moving, no confirmation that anything is being built, consider the possibility that the absence of visible progress is not the same as the absence of actual progress. Lazarus's sisters couldn't see what the delay was accomplishing while they were living inside it. They only understood it afterward, once the outcome arrived in a form far greater than what they'd originally asked for. Your understanding of this season might work the same way, not something you can fully see now, but something that becomes obvious in hindsight, once the proper time Ecclesiastes describes actually arrives. So ask yourself honestly, have you already decided, somewhere quietly inside yourself, that this silence means nothing is happening? If you have, this might be the moment to reconsider that conclusion. Not because the waiting will suddenly feel easier, and not because there's a guarantee attached to exactly when the proper time will arrive, but because the same God who let Lazarus's sisters wait 4 days before showing them why the delay mattered is not operating on a different pattern with you now. If this spoke to where you are right now, stay. There's more waiting for you here. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one, because what looks like silence right now is not the same as nothing happening. It's construction you simply can't see yet.